Welcome to week 4 of the Draft Report. My name is Matt Brown. Be sure and head to your app store, download the Draft Fantasy app, and use the promo code REPORT, R-E-P-O-R-T, and you will get a free entry into a real money cash game once you make your first deposit. So be sure and do that. It's a great way to play daily fantasy. It's different than the salary cap games, and it's a whole lot of fun. Just a real quick snake draft. You will love it, I promise you. Week 3 was interesting. I think we got a lot right. A couple of things we got wrong. I said don't invest a high draft pick in Tom Brady, and of course he went nuts, but we're not going to make that mistake again this week. We are going to invest heavily in Tom Brady, if at all possible, depending on where we sit in the draft. So we're going to need to take a look at where Tom Brady's going. Obviously, if we have one of those picks where we can grab him fairly early, I think we should. Listen, this Carolina defense, it actually can be scored on. We thought this was going to be super, super stout. Now, they're good, but they are not going to stop Tom Brady and what they've got going on in this offense right now. I expect Tom Brady, as far as raw points go, to be the highest scorer of the week at the quarterback position. And the good thing is his defense is actually not very good. And so Carolina is actually going to be able to score in this game. And if that's the case, then Tom Brady won't be able to take his foot off the gas. And that's what we want. We want him to be able to continue to score us fantasy points if we've invested in him. So that's what we're going to look for this week in Tom Brady. One of the games I'm targeting here is this Atlanta and Buffalo game in Atlanta on the fast track there in the Georgia Dome. Now, look, we're talking about an implied total here of Bills about 20.5 points. We've got the Falcons at about 28.25 points, 28.5 points, depending on where you look. The over-under in this game, 48.5, 49 points, something like that. That is a big total, expected to be a lot of fantasy goodness in this game. I think Matt Ryan and Tyrod Taylor are very, very viable options here, especially Tyrod Taylor with his feet. Get you 30 or 40 yards. That's as good as a passing touchdown, guys. So, he doesn't have to go completely ham throwing for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns to still equal what some of these other guys are going to be able to do. So definitely like me some Tyrod Taylor this week. Another guy that I'm going to be on, depending on where he falls to me in the draft, is going to be Russell Wilson. And yes, I said Russell Wilson was not going to be in for a good game last week. And of course, he went absolutely bonkers. If we look at the statistics right here as to what Russell Wilson did last week, I mean, we're talking about a guy that went out and threw for, 373 yards on 49 attempts there on the road at Tennessee. Now he's going to be home against Indianapolis. I expect this to be a statement game for this Seattle team. I expect Russell Wilson to have it very, very easy with this home field advantage that they have there in Seattle, with it being a primetime game, with it being against this pathetic Colts defense. So I think Russell Wilson in for a very big game here. One of the guys I'm not going to be on this week, and I think a lot of people might look to go that way, is Ben Roethlisberger, just because, again, this is Ben Roethlisberger splits on the road are real. They're bad. He is bad on the road. He is much, much worse. He's going to be on the road at Baltimore after Baltimore just got thrashed over there in London, thinking that they are going to bounce back pretty strong here. Big time fade for me on Ben Roethlisberger. A couple of other guys that I am going to be targeting at the quarterback position. I think Trevor Siemian at home against Oakland. This Oakland defense is not very good, and Denver plays real well at home. One of the bigger home field advantages in all of sports, I think, when it comes to the altitude there. That we're talking about these guys going up there and not being able to breathe properly and getting tired sooner. But the Denver team is used to it. They practice in it. They play in it all the time, especially here early in the season as these guys are still really, really getting in to football shape here. I like Trevor Siemian here to have a real good game against this Oakland team. So he's going to be a guy that, if I can't get one of those top names that I just mentioned, certainly going to be a guy that's on my radar to make it onto my squad, to make it on to my team here. Another guy I'm going to be looking at is Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz going up against this Chargers team on the road, I think they're going to have to throw the ball. Listen, Philadelphia can't run. And so that's actually a bonus for us in DFS whenever we look at a quarterback, because because Carson Wentz is just going to have to throw the ball if they're going to score. So look, he's a second-year guy, definitely still improving. That said, I like the leaps and bounds that he's taken here. Zach Ertz been a big weapon for him. Obviously, Alshon Jeffrey is a big addition to that offense for him. Can't run the ball, like I said. I think Carson Wentz is in for a big day as well. And finally, one of the other quarterbacks that I'm going to be looking at this week is Carson Palmer. The corpse of Carson Palmer seems to be a little bit overrated. It looks like Carson Palmer has actually still got a little bit left in the tank, and especially against bad teams. Look, we take a look at what he did against the Cowboys this past week, went for 325 yards on 48 pass attempts. There's a lot to be said for the loss of David Johnson. They're not going to be able to move the ball on the ground. They're going to have to pass it, and when you have to pass it, you're just going to have these guys throw 45 plus times a game. And even if Carson Palmer's not all that efficient, whenever you throw that many times, you just have a lot of chances to make things happen. And again, against this San Francisco team that he's playing, those opportunities should turn into fantasy points for us in week 4. Taking a look at running backs for week 4, topping the list for me is Ezekiel Elliott. Dallas going to get those LA Rams, and those LA Rams are actually very bad at defending the run so far this season, giving up the 4th most yards per game when it comes to rushing. We've seen the workload for Zeke Elliott. We've seen that he's actually getting involved in the passing game as well, helps us out there and keeps that floor real high. I think the volume is going to be there for him. Really, really like Zeke Elliott this week, my number 1 running back on the board. Le'Veon Bell's always in play strictly due to the volume that he gets. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Le'Veon Bell is a bad play by any stretch of the imagination. But going up against Baltimore, like I said, I think this is a bounce back spot for Baltimore. I'm not going to say don't draft Le'Veon Bell. I mean, that would be ridiculous of me to say. What I will say is I don't think he's a number 1 overall pick this week. If you have the number 1 overall pick in a draft, I don't think he's even a guy that you really have to force into even one of your first round picks, to be perfectly honest. I think you can get the same production probably elsewhere this week. A couple of other guys I really am going to be looking at and targeting pretty high. Leonard Fournette going up against the New York Jets. We saw what Leonard Fournette could do whenever he's given the volume. I mean, they are going to run this guy. It might shorten his career, but they are going to run this guy into the absolute ground. They invested a high draft pick into him, and this Jets defense traded away their best run defender, and they are going to be exposed all year long. We all know Blake Bortles can't do anything when he's not playing in London. So this is going to be a heavy dose of Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette going to be a guy that's going to get a ton of work this week. Love Leonard Fournette this week, and I think you should too. LaShawn McCoy is actually leading the Buffalo Bills in pass receptions. He might end up leading this team in pass receptions and targets this year. I mean, they are just loving to give the ball to him out of the backfield. And on top of that, what we have going on with LaShawn McCoy is they don't have any wide receivers. They don't have anyone that can catch the ball. I mean, Charles Clay is a tight end, and he's their best receiver right now. So LaShawn McCoy is going to continue to be featured in the pass game here, and I love that. I already mentioned that I love this Buffalo and Atlanta game as it is anyway. So let's go ahead and target LaShawn McCoy this week. And if we love that game, we love the scoring, Devontae Freeman obviously has to make our list as well. One of the guys I'm going to be targeting as well, and I think that maybe he'll be popular. I don't know. I mean, I guess it all depends on what people think of this offense if Case Keenum's leading the way. But Dalvin Cook has looked amazing. A true 3-down back there in Minnesota. He's catching passes. He's playing a majority of the snaps here, getting goal line work, the whole 9 yards. Love what he brings to the table against this Detroit team. Whenever we look at this game, I mean, look, we're talking about an over-under of about 43 points here. So, I mean, like there's expected to be at least a decent amount of points scored in this game, with them having an implied total of about 21 points. That's 3 touchdowns. If their implied touchdown totals 3, you got to think Dalvin Cook is good for one of those. So give me a lot of Dalvin Cook this week. One of the guys I'm going to be avoiding is Melvin Gordon. And listen, here's the thing. It's not because of his talent, and it's not because of the matchup. Perfectly honest with you, it's the fact that he keeps getting banged up and leaving games for periods of time and things like that. And so for me, with Melvin Gordon, especially in these draft situations where you only got 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers and a quarterback, I don't want to invest one of my high picks in a guy that might end up sitting half the game, getting banged up again. I'll wait until he's healthy before I invest heavily in him. And that's the thing is, I mean, if he fell to me in the 5th round, sure, I would take him. But the fact of the matter is he probably won't. He's probably going to be going in first rounds or second rounds, and I'll just let someone else take him there. One of the guys I do like this week, even though I don't like the Carolina offense as a whole, and especially don't like Cam Newton, is I like Christian McCaffrey, because whenever you look at this, you've got a banged up Kelvin Benjamin. You've got Greg Olsen that's already out for the season. So now your number 1 receiver is Devin Funchess. not going to work out with Devin Funchess being your number one receiver. They're going to dump the ball off to Christian McCaffrey early and often. He is going to get a ton of looks out of the backfield. Wouldn't surprise me if he has double-digit targets in this game. Wouldn't be a stretch. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for him to have double-digit catches in this game. So for me, Christian McCaffrey is going to be on my list of guys that I'm looking to get on my draft. If I like Seattle this week, then I'm going to like Chris Carson. I don't know if you guys have even heard of Chris Carson yet, but Chris Carson seems to be the guy that is going to take over that backfield there in Seattle. Chris Carson going up against Indianapolis. We think that this is a smash fest for Seattle. What happens in Smash Fest? You get up early, and when you get up early, then you start running to salt the clock. Chris Carson going to get all the work in the second half there. Love Chris Carson in this situation. Another running back that I'm going to, it's kind of off the board a little bit, guys, but that I think as far as raw points go, could actually surprise some people this week, and that's Bilal Powell. What we're looking at is likely a situation where he is going to be the only guy going. Matt Forte does not look like he is going to play this week. When Matt Forte doesn't play, Bilal Powell gets all the looks. So again, another guy that comes out of the backfield, and if he's going to get all the rushing touches as well, we could be looking at a guy with 25 plus touches this week. Like me some Bilal Powell a lot as well. A couple of guys I'm probably not going to be so high on, even after a monster week last week. DeMarco Murray, one, still kind of gimpy, still kind of battling a hamstring issue, which obviously with running backs could flare up at any time. But also, if they're going to beat Houston, I think they probably just beat Houston through the air. I don't think that they're going to do it on the ground, trying to do that with J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney and everything like that. So for me, I think that DeMarco Murray is going to be a pass for me this week. Tevin Coleman, who I liked a lot last week, is just getting outsnapped badly by Devontae Freeman. So I think I will hold off until Tevin Coleman starts to get and become a little bit more part of that offense. Now, if you want to go off the board a little bit, guys, and this is talking about if you're in like a, maybe an 8-team or a 10-team type league, Jacquizz Rodgers this week, and you're going to say, why in the hell would you recommend Jacquizz Rodgers? Going up against the Giants here, though, the Giants are giving up over 150 yards a game on the ground. They are the worst rushing defensive team in the NFL through 3 weeks. Now, will that change? Probably, but so far they hadn't figured it out. And Jacquizz Rodgers, his last week of starting here, Doug Martin will be back next week, so they could literally give Jacquizz Rodgers all the touches in the world because they don't care if he gets banged up. He's not going to start next week anyway. We might see Jacquizz Rodgers approach the 30-touch mark, which we saw a couple of different times last year whenever he was called upon to start. So another guy that I'm going to be looking at there pretty heavily. Going to avoid the Detroit backfield situation between Abdullah and Riddick. They're just basically splitting everything down the middle there. And so the upside is just not there. I mean, they both kind of have a little bit of a floor, but there's no upside, and we're trying to win here, right? So we want to win, and we don't want to be dealing with those guys. And again, same goes for some of these other guys that were trendy last week. Isaiah Crowell, Wendell Smallwood was kind of trendy last week. I think the only guy that maybe you could look at that's really, really off the board might be a Buck Allen. Buck Allen probably will get the majority of the work there in Baltimore going up against this Pittsburgh defense. Pittsburgh defense actually played pretty well so far. I think Buck Allen might be used a lot in the pass game there for Baltimore. But again, listen, if you can get your hands on Ezekiel Elliott this week, I think that is the way to go. That is the way to smash, and that's the way to win one of your drafts. Talking wide receivers here in week 4. And listen, every single week you could put Antonio Brown at the top of the list. I understand that. While I think Ben Roethlisberger might struggle, Antonio Brown just never struggles. I mean, Antonio Brown just gets it done week after week after week. Look, Martavis Bryant actually got outsnapped by Juju Smith-Schuster last week. So, I mean, Antonio Brown is the guy there. He is going to get all the targets. He runs high percentage routes as well as the long routes. So, I mean, like, this is a guy that could possibly catch you a 50-yard touchdown, but also could get peppered with like 6 and 7 yard targets as well. So, I mean, this is just what we love whenever we talk about these guys. Certainly, Antonio Brown's got to be on your radar there. Julio Jones, I like Atlanta a lot, like I mentioned. Obviously, I like Julio Jones. The problem is they said coming into the season they were going to really be looking for Julio Jones in the red zone, and that really has not happened so far this year. Do they try to feed him in the end zone this week and try to make things right? Hopefully, I'm going to be investing in Julio Jones again this week, but listen, if it doesn't happen this week, through 4 weeks, if they're still not looking for Julio Jones, we kind of got to assess how high of a draft pick in these drafts, we really want to invest in Julio Jones, because if the touchdown upside is not there, I mean, sure, Julio Jones can always have 10 catches in a game, but if it's 10 catches for 90-something yards, I mean, you can get that production from someone with half the catches, half the yards, but has a touchdown or two. So for me, Julio Jones is going to be a question. I'm going to invest this week, but that's with the caveat that if he doesn't produce this week, we're going to have to reassess how this all goes with Julio Jones going forward. Odell Beckham, wow, after last week, right? I mean, listen, he did the whole little dog pissing thing after he scored. I mean, it caused all kinds of people. The guy is just nutty upstairs, but he can play football with the best of them. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And so for me, Odell Beckham, certainly a very, very high pick for me. Even listen, Tampa Bay is likely to be a little thin again in the defensive backfield. Odell Beckham, even though Eli Manning looks old and looks kind of washed up, I think Odell Beckham still has a big game this week. Same with AJ Green going up. Like I have to tell you, AJ Green's going to have a big week going up against Cleveland. No, I don't have to tell you that. But anyway, I'll let you know anyway. Big on AJ Green. Yeah, I know that's a real big shocker for you there. I'm going to lay off Dez Bryant. Listen, like I said, I just think the way that you beat this LA Rams team is that you just do it on the ground. Like I said, they're hemorrhaging yards on the ground right now. Top 5 as far as giving up yards on the ground. So I don't know. I just don't think the upside for Dez Bryant is there, because I don't think they'll need Dez Bryant, to be perfectly honest. I think that Zeke will get it done. And I think Dez Bryant's a guy that this week for me is going to be a pretty hard pass. Keenan Allen against Philadelphia. So Philadelphia, what they do in the secondary here is typically on the outside. They give up tons, and Keenan Allen runs a lot of his routes in the slot. That said, you just can't get over the volume that the guy gets. He gets 10 plus targets. It seems like every single game has had, a 9-catch game already this year. So it's hard for me to say don't play Keenan Allen, but at the same time, I think this could be one of those days where, the outside guys like a Travis Benjamin or a Tyrell Williams or something like that just absolutely goes off against this Philadelphia team. Keenan Allen going to be pretty far down on my list unless he slips to me kind of way later there. If I like Russell Wilson, obviously I like his main pass catcher and Doug Baldwin. That said, we need to monitor his health. He left the game with a groin injury. Those are no joke, obviously. So going to be something that I'm going to monitor. Doug Baldwin, if it's even a kind of a questionable type situation, obviously I'm not going to invest. I think we could get it elsewhere. Demaryius Thomas is a guy that I am going to be targeting heavily and really, really high. I think this is the week. This Oakland team can't play defense. If you look like last week, you're going to think they can't play offense. I think they're going to be able to play offense. I think Derek Carr plays better. That was his worst game, maybe even as a pro last week in Washington. I think what we see here, though, is this Oakland team let Trevor Siemian, again, in Denver, have his way. And I think Emmanuel Sanders is probably a pretty viable option as well. I like Demaryius a little bit better, bigger dude, red zone type stuff. They use him in bubble screen. They try to force the ball to Demaryius Thomas, and that's what I like whenever they try to force the ball to these receivers. So again, Demaryius Thomas, super high up on my list, maybe higher than a lot of other guys that you would even imagine. I might even take Demaryius Thomas over Julio this week. If I like Tom Brady's receivers have to be up there. The problem is this is going to be kind of like receiver roulette every week. Last week it worked out with everyone. So if you had any of those guys, it worked out well. However, there's going to be weeks where Brandon Cooks has huge games. There's going to be weeks where Chris Hogan has huge games. And there's going to be weeks where Gronk has huge games. And then, of course, there'll be games like last week where a couple of guys have big games. I think it's fine week after week, especially if you're going to play in multiple drafts. I think it's fine to take a Cooks in one and a Hogan in another and a Gronk in another or something like that and try to get exposure to one of these pass catchers. Because again, every week, one of them is going to go off. It's just really hard to pinpoint which one. For me this week, I'll probably be investing in all three, to be perfectly honest. It's hard to see which one is going to have the distinct advantage going up against Carolina. Larry Fitzgerald, if you watched a primetime game for everyone to see, just got littered. I mean, just blitzed with targets. I mean, if we look at his game log here from last week, he was able to accumulate 149 receiving yards on 15 targets and 13 receptions. So, I mean, listen, 15 targets for Larry Fitz. And like we talked about with Carson Palmer, the thing is they can't run the ball, and then without David Johnson. And so that just creates so much more opportunity for a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, the old reliable, the old faithful, and even saw some downfield targets this past week. I mean, made one of the greatest catches I've seen in the last few years. And so Larry Fitzgerald still has it, still looking forward to Larry Fitzgerald. And I think I'm going to have a decent amount of him. Golden Tate is the final guy that really jumps off the page at me here. Xavier Rhodes is a elite corner for Minnesota. So what's going to happen here, though, is he doesn't move inside. He stays on the outside. Golden Tate, they're going to move him, their best receiver. They're going to, he plays slot anyway the majority of the time. They're going to make sure that he's in the slot all the time here. Golden Tate is going to get peppered with targets because they're going to avoid Xavier Rhodes, who has been unbelievable guarding these outside wide receivers so far this year. Golden Tate could be in for a 15 target game like we just talked about with Larry Fitzgerald. And finally, listen, Rashard Matthews. Like I said, I think Tennessee gets it done through the air as opposed to on the ground. So through the air is going to be their number one wide receiver, and that is Rashard Matthews. Guys, thanks for joining us for week 4 of the Draft Report. Again, my name is Matt Brown, and head to your app store, download the Draft Fantasy app, and use the promo code REPORT, REPORT, and you will get a free entry into a real money contest upon your first deposit. Take advantage of it. These draft drafts are so incredibly fun. You will not regret it. Trust me. You can tweet me at Matt Brown M2 if you don't like it. I can't imagine that I'm going to get any tweets from any of you out there. Thanks a lot, and we'll be back for week 5.